Second bloom of the mountain plum. The estate of Imperial First Minister Shen Yi had resembled a bowl frozen solid for 3 years now. Winter here seemed never to yield to spring. The garden, once graced by his wife's quiet laughter, was overgrown with thorny bushes, and no one set out clay bowls of fragrant wild plum blossom tea on the veranda anymore. The gentle, delicate Lady Su Lan had left this world on a cold, frosty night, succumbing to consumption in her husband's arms. Shen Yi had locked his heart away, transforming himself into a dry, flawless, and terrifying machine of justice. But fate is an old street gambler who never reveals his cards in advance. Su Lan came to with a sharp, suffocating cough. She gasped convulsively, instinctively bracing for the familiar, gut-wrenching pain to pierce her chest. She squeezed her eyes shut, prepared to taste the salty tang of blood on her lips. Yet her lungs suddenly filled with clean, cool, and utterly free air. Where am I?" she rasped. Her own voice made her flinch and snap her eyes open. It sounded too low, hoarse, with a distinct cracking timbre that could never belong to a refined aristocrat. Su Lan hurriedly sat up in bed. Instead of silk sheets and soft pillows embroidered with gold thread, her hands met the rustle of coarse, prickly straw that reeked of dust. She looked around and froze. The windows of her former bedroom looked out onto the garden and were covered in pure white paper. Here, before her, were cracked log walls of a tiny, lopsided hut, through the gaps of which a dim pre-dawn light filtered in. Panicking, she quickly swung her legs off the bed. Her bare feet were instantly stung by the cold of the uneven, dirty wooden floor. Su Lan dazedly felt her face. The skin on her cheeks was rough, a tiny scar could be felt on her chin, and her eyebrows seemed unnaturally thick. She cast her gaze downwards and froze. She wasn't wearing delicate underskirts. On her body were rough, grey trousers made of the cheapest, poorly dyed cotton. Why would a doctor or ye dress me in commoner's clothes? Has our estate gone bankrupt while I was unconscious? Su Lan tried to take a wide step forward to reach the door, but her new legs felt unnaturally long. Her center of gravity was completely thrown off. The elegant gait she had been taught in her father's house failed her. She got tangled in her own knees, lost her balance, and crashed to the floor with a loud thud, painfully bruising her hip. "Oh, great ancestors," she exhaled, rubbing her knee. Her voice sounded low and bassy again. Lying on her side, Su Lan frantically ran her hands over her chest. It was absolutely, terrifyingly flat. No hint of feminine curves. For a second she lay in absolute, ringing silence, hearing only the frantic pounding of her heart. Then, seized by icy terror, she feverishly peered down the waistband of her trousers. A strangled, hoarse cry of pure, unadulterated horror escaped her chest. At that very moment, the rickety wooden door of the hut creaked open. A wrinkled face belonging to an elderly woman in a dirty bonnet peered through the crack. "Fei Lin! You shut your mouth, you brat!" the old woman shrieked piercingly. "It's barely dawn. Stop squealing like a forest demon. Bit your heels. Get your lazy bones up and get to the market. If you get thrown out of the tavern again today for breaking dishes, you can spend the night on the cobblestones with your debts." The door slammed shut, leaving Su Lan utterly alone. She sat on the cold floor, clutching her head in her hands, whispering, "Fei Lin? Brat? She called me a brat. I need a mirror. Urgently, I need to see myself." In the corner of the hut stood a cracked clay basin with stagnant water. Su Lan crawled over to it, splashed the cold liquid on her face with trembling hands, and forced herself to look down. On the rippling water's surface reflected the face of a young man. A strong, sharp chin, thick sweeping eyebrows, and the insolent, stubborn slant of dark eyes. She had become a man, but her name was Su Lan. She was the legitimate wife of Minister Shen Yi, who had died 3 winters ago. How could her soul remain alive, and furthermore be trapped inside the body of a 20-year-old street urchin named Fei Lin? The old woman, who Lin soon learned was the landlady of the dilapidated boarding house where Fei Lin had been staying, returned an hour later with a bowl of thin, watery gruel and a look of profound disgust. "So you finally decided to wake up," she snapped, slamming the bowl onto the rickety table. "I thought you drowned in your own drunken stupor. Not that anyone would miss you." Lin stared at the gruel. It was lumpy, cold, and smelled faintly of burnt rice. In her previous life, she would never have touched such a thing, but her new stomach growled so loudly that she nearly jumped. "Thank you," she said, reaching for the bowl. The old woman's eyes narrowed. "Since when do you say thank you? Did you hit your head harder than I thought?" I meant to say, you're still as unpleasant as ever, old hag." Lin tried, forcing a sneer onto his new face. The woman snorted. "That's more like it. Eat up and get out. You owe me 3 weeks' rent, and I'm not running a charity." She shuffled out, muttering about ungrateful tenants and the general uselessness of young men. Lin sat alone in the cold hut, staring at the bowl of gruel and trying to process her new reality. She had died. She was certain of it. The consuming cough, the blood on her lips, the fading warmth of his arms around her. All of it was real. And yet, here she was, in a stranger's body, in a hovel that smelled of mold and desperation. "All right," she whispered to herself, stirring the gruel with a cracked spoon. "All right, you're Su Lan. You were the wife of the most powerful man in the empire. You managed a household of 200 servants. You survived court politics, the gossips of the noble ladies, and your mother-in-law's endless criticisms. You can survive this." She took a bite of the gruel and nearly gagged. "Oh, this is absolutely vile. How do people eat this?" Nevertheless, she forced herself to eat. If she was going to survive, she needed strength. And if she was going to get back to Yi, she needed to learn everything she could about this new body. The first thing Lin needed to do was learn how to walk. She had spent 25 years as a graceful, elegant woman. Her steps were light, measured, and accompanied by the gentle sway of skirts. Now, she was expected to stride like a man. Broad shoulders, wide steps, arms swinging freely. It was impossible. Lin stood in the middle of the hut, arms at her sides, trying to figure out how to move. She took a step forward, then another. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "Why is everything so long?" She tried to walk normally, but her hips refused to cooperate. She ended up waddling like a duck with a sore foot. On her third attempt, she tripped over her own feet and crashed into the wall. "Oh, who designed these legs? They're utterly useless." By the time she reached the market, Lin's knees were bruised, her dignity was in tatters, and she had developed a deep and burning hatred for men's boots. "I can't imagine why anyone wears these," she grumbled, looking down at the enormous leather boots that encased her feet like lead weights. "They weigh more than my entire wardrobe used to." The market was chaos. People pushed and shoved, merchants shouted their wares, and the smell of fish, spices, and sweat mixed into an overwhelming cloud. Lin navigated through the crowd as best she could, trying to remember what Fei Lin was supposed to be doing. "Work," she said to herself. "I need work, or I'll starve, or freeze, or get thrown out by that horrible old woman." She scanned the market stalls, looking for anyone who might hire a scruffy, skinny youth with no skills and no references. The vegetable sellers ignored her. The fishmongers waved her away. The textile merchants laughed at her threadbare clothes. Then she saw a sign in front of a tavern. "Help wanted. Inquire within." Lin squared his shoulders, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door with all the confidence he could muster. The tavern owner was a large, hairy man with arms as thick as tree trunks and a permanent scowl etched onto his face. "You're the one asking for work?" he grunted, eyeing Lin with obvious skepticism. "You look like a stiff breeze could knock you over." "I'm stronger than I look," Lin said, puffing out his flat chest. "I can carry things. I can clean things. I can." "Can you wash dishes without breaking them?" "I'm sure I can." "Good, because the last boy I hired broke 3 of them in one day. Cost me a fortune." The tavern owner shoved a wooden crate full of dirty dishes into Lin's arms. "Back room. Don't break anything." Lin marched to the back room, determined to prove himself. The dishes were greasy, stained, and covered in dried fruit. The water was cold, the soap was weak, and the rags were threadbare. But Lin was not a quitter. She worked for hours, scrubbing until her fingers were wrinkled and raw. By the end of the afternoon, she had cleaned every dish, pot, and utensil in the tavern. She was exhausted, miserable, and terribly aware that her hands had never worked so hard in her entire life. "Not bad," The tavern owner grunted, examining her work. You can come back tomorrow. Same time. Don't be late. Lin almost wept with relief. But the first day at the tavern was a comedy of errors. She dropped a stack of bowls, sending them crashing to the floor. She used too much soap and flooded the kitchen. She mistook salt for sugar and added it to a customer's tea. Are you trying to poison me? The customer yelled, spitting out the tea. Hi. Lin stammered, his voice cracking embarrassingly. Get out! Get me a new cup from someone who knows what they're doing! Lin fled to the back room, his face burning with shame. He had managed a household of 200 people, negotiated with nobles, hosted diplomatic dinners, and now he couldn't even pour a cup of tea properly. This is a nightmare, he whispered, burying his face in his hands. A complete and utter nightmare. The second day was even worse. Lin had been given the task of delivering a message to the main administrative office. The errand required passing through the public square, where a large bathhouse stood. Lin was hot, sweaty, and still covered in the grime from the tavern. The bathhouse looked incredibly inviting. No one will notice me, he reasoned. I'll just go in, wash quickly, and leave. It's not that complicated. He was wrong. The men's bathhouse was a sea of naked flesh. Men of all ages, shapes, and sizes were lounging in the hot water, scrubbing their backs, laughing loudly, and, worst of all, completely unashamed. Lin stood frozen at the entrance. His new body was still a mystery to him. He didn't want to see it. He certainly didn't want anyone else to see it. Oi, kid! You gonna stand there all day or actually wash? A large, hairy man called out. I have a skin condition. Lin blurted. It's contagious. Very, very contagious. The man's eyes widened. He scrambled away, splashing water everywhere. Soon, the area around Lin was completely clear. Lin shuffled to the farthest corner of the bathhouse, keeping his head down, and quickly poured water over himself with frantic speed. He scrubbed his arms and legs as fast as humanly possible. That's what you think of me, huh? He hissed at his own reflection, scrubbing his chest with unnecessary vigor. Flat as a board and twice as useless. A young soldier nearby gave him a strange look. Were you talking to yourself? Only because nobody else will listen to me, Lin snapped. The soldier wisely retreated. Lin finished his bath in record time, threw his clothes back on, and fled the bathhouse without looking back. He didn't stop running until he reached the tavern, where he collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. I'm never doing that again, he panted. Never, never, never. The third day brought a small sliver of hope. Lin was cleaning the tavern when two merchants sat down at a nearby table and began discussing capital gossip. They spoke in hushed voices, but Lin's ears were sharp. Did you hear about the First Minister? The first merchant said. They say he's practically a ghost these days. Barely eats, barely sleeps, barely speaks to anyone. That's what happens when you lose a wife like Lady Su Lan, the second merchant replied. She was the jewel of the capital. Beautiful, talented, kind. They say he hasn't smiled since she died. I heard he rejected 3 brides offered by the emperor himself, refused to even meet them. Can you blame him? Some loves don't fade. Lin's heart clenched. He dropped the rag he was holding and had to scramble to pick it up. Yi, his Yi, the love of his life, was still grieving, still mourning, still alone. Oh, my foolish, stubborn Yi, Lin whispered, pressing his palm to his flat chest. You're destroying yourself, and no one is there to help you. The idea struck him like lightning. He couldn't go back to his old life. He couldn't reveal himself as Su Lan without risking accusations of sorcery or possession. But he could be near Yi. He could take care of him, watch over him, make sure he didn't waste away from grief. I'll find a way into that house, Lin vowed. I don't care how. I'll scrub floors if I have to. I'll carry water, chop wood, wash clothes, as long as I'm close to him. The merchants continued their gossip, unaware that their words had just changed a man's destiny. A few days later, Lin was running errands in the market when the crowd suddenly parted. Make way! Someone shouted. Make way for the First Minister's carriage! Lin's heart stopped. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the protests of the other pedestrians, until he had a clear view of the street. The carriage was magnificent. Dark wood, blue silk curtains, silver bells chiming softly at the corners. It was pulled by 4 black horses, their coats gleaming like polished obsidian. Lin recognized the bells. He had chosen them himself 3 years ago for the carriage he and Yi used on their trips to the countryside. The carriage slowed as it approached the market. The street was narrow, and the crowd was dense. Lin craned his neck, desperate to catch a glimpse of his husband. And then the curtain moved. A pale, thin hand with long fingers pulled the silk aside, and there, in the dim interior of the carriage, sat Shen Yi. He was beautiful. He had always been beautiful, like a sculpture carved from white marble by the best artist in the empire. But now he was gaunt, hollow-eyed. His cheeks were sunken, his clothes hung loosely on his frame, and his dark eyes were fixed on some distant, unseen point. Lin's breath caught. Yi, he'd breathed, the name escaping his lips without permission. The carriage passed by, and the curtain fell back into place. The silver bells chimed softly, and then they faded into the noise of the market. Lin stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. "I'm coming," he whispered. "I promise, Yi. I'm coming back to you." The back gate of the First Minister's estate looked exactly as it had 3 years ago. Heavy oak doors, reinforced with iron darkened by moisture, over which hung the branches of an old sprawling willow. Su Lan had once loved to approach this spot from inside the garden to listen to the servants chatting cheerfully as they received fresh greens and fish from the city traders. Now, however, she, or rather the lanky boy in a faded, second-hand jacket, stood on the outside, nervously adjusting his collar. "Stop fidgeting," he muttered to himself. "You're a man now. Men don't fidget. Men are firm, decisive, manly." He took a deep breath and stepped toward the gate. There was chaos at the service entrance. Kitchen servants were hurriedly unloading a cart of groceries, trying to save sacks of flour from a gushing downpour. Overseeing the process was a fat, red-faced head chef, Uncle Wang. He waved a greasy ladle and shouted so loudly that veins bulged on his neck. "Faster, you slackers! If the flour gets damp, I'll personally feed you to the yard dogs. Move it!" Lin swallowed, squared his shoulders, and stepped directly under the awning, blocking the fat man's path. "Esteemed Master Wang," Lin began. From nervousness, his voice treacherously cracked again. Starting as a deep male baritone, it ended on a thin, girlish squeak on the last syllable. Uncle Wang froze, slowly lowered his ladle, and gave the uninvited guest a heavy look from under his bushy eyebrows. "And what manner of wonder beast is this?" the chef grumbled, wiping the sweat from his brow with a dirty apron. "Which theater did you escape from, boy? What do you want? Can't you see we have a flood here?" "I need work in your kitchen," Lin said firmly, this time managing to keep his voice in the lower register. "I heard your last assistant ran away, unable to endure the master's whims. I'm ready to take his place." Chef Wang laughed so loudly that the servants with the sacks turned around for a moment. "You, an assistant? It's written all over your face that you've never held anything heavier than dice in your life. Look at your hands, long, thin, like a wandering musician's. You'd faint at the first sight of a pig carcass. Get lost, you street weakling, before I smack you with this ladle." Lin didn't budge. Inside him boiled the pride of Su Lan, the woman who had once managed this entire vast household. She knew more about cooking than this crude chef could ever imagine. "Weakling?" Lin narrowed his eyes, and a dangerous, purely streetwise spark of Fei Lin glinted in his dark eyes. "If you send that duck, which your incompetence are currently marinating in wine in the kitchen, to Master Shen Yi tomorrow, someone else will be sitting in your seat." Master Wang instantly stopped laughing. His face turned from red to purple. "What did you say, you pup?" "You are using ordinary rice wine and dried star anise for the marinade," Lin said calmly, enunciating every word. "But the First Minister has had inflamed wounds on his left shoulder since yesterday. The whole city is gossiping about it. With such an ailment, star anise will cause a strong fever, and the duck meat will taste bitter to him, like wormwood. He will throw your dish out the window." Chef Wang's mouth dropped open in shock. Only a handful inside the estate knew of the minister's illness. Shen Yi carefully concealed his weaknesses from political enemies. How do you know this?" The fat man whispered, involuntarily stepping back. If you take me on, Lin stepped forward, leaning close to the chef's ear. I will add wild ginger root soaked in honey and a pinch of dry chrysanthemum to the marinade. This will remove the bitterness, soothe the heat in his body, and Master Shen Yi will empty his plate for the first time in 3 weeks. So, Master Wang, should I leave, or will you give me a knife? The chef stared long at the insolent, soaked through youth. Then he sighed heavily and pointed his ladle into the depths of the dark kitchen corridor. Come in. You'll clean the pots, carry water. If you don't have calluses on your hands by evening, you'll be out of here faster than a wet cat. Lin smiled triumphantly and stepped into the warmth of the estate, feeling his heart pounding wildly. The first fortress had been taken. 2 weeks passed. Fei Lin worked himself to the bone. His new body, initially rather frail for a street kid, gradually got used to the heavy labor. His palms were covered with tough calluses from scouring the huge copper vats, and his shoulders ached from carrying buckets of water. But he didn't complain. Every day, he secretly watched as servants carried meals away on silver trays to the master's main study, and saw the nearly untouched dishes return to the kitchen. Shen Yi was still starving himself. He wasn't living. He was merely sustaining his body's existence to fulfill his duty to the state. One evening, Lin found old Ju in the kitchen, staring mournfully at a tray of uneaten food. He won't touch anything, the old butler said, shaking his head. I've tried everything. His favorite dishes, his childhood treats, the most delicate broths. He takes one bite and pushes it away. Lin's heart ached. Let me try. Try what? The master doesn't trust new servants. He barely trusts me, and I've served him for 20 years. Just let me make him some tea. I know a recipe from my mother. It was her secret remedy for grief. Old Ju looked skeptical, but he was clearly desperate. Fine. Make it quickly, and don't disappoint me. Lin hurried to the kitchen, pulling a small pouch of herbs from his bosom. He had been gathering them for weeks, spending his meager pennies on the ingredients he knew would soothe his husband's weary soul. 3 spoonfuls of dried wild plum leaves, he whispered, his fingers trembling slightly. A pinch of crushed cane sugar, and exactly 3 drops of mountain ginger juice to drive the winter chill from his thoughts. The aroma rising from the kettle instantly filled the drab kitchen. It was subtle, barely perceptible, yet surprisingly profound. It smelled like the best days of this estate when Su Lan was alive. Take this to him, old Ju said, handing Lin the tray. And don't drop it. Every step along the long corridors of the main house echoed in Lin's chest with the loud thumping of his heart. This house was his home. Every wooden panel, every tapestry depicting flying cranes on the walls. Su Lan had chosen it all. But now in the nocturnal silence, the estate felt alien and ominous. No bright lanterns burned here anymore. It smelled only of old scrolls, dust, and cold. Lin approached the massive sliding doors of the main study. Absolute, dead silence reigned behind them. He slipped inside, trying to step as softly as possible. The room was immersed in deep semi-darkness, broken only by the flickering flame of a single candle on the huge desk. Around the desk rose veritable mountains of papers, reports, and scrolls. Shen Yi had buried himself alive under state affairs. The minister himself sat in his chair, leaning back. His formal dark blue robe was carelessly open at the neck, revealing thin collarbones. He was pinching the bridge of his nose, and his pale face looked like a mask carved from ice. Lin approached slowly, knelt by the low table, and placed the bowl of hot decoction down with a quiet, careful clink. I said not to disturb me, came Shen Yi's voice. It was low, icy, and so tired that Lin's heart ached painfully. Take this swill away and get out. I have no appetite. Lin should have left. He should have bowed silently and melted into the darkness of the corridor as the butler had ordered. But looking at those emaciated shoulders and how gaunt his beloved husband had become, he simply couldn't move from the spot. Forgetting everything in the world, Lin folded his hands at his chest in a flawless, exclusively feminine aristocratic bow, as Su Lan had done thousands of times, and he spoke in his new, yet surprisingly soft and melodious tone. Your Excellency, this decoction will help soothe the fever in your temples. Please, take at least a sip before it cools. You have exhausted yourself completely with work. Shen Yi abruptly threw his brush onto the desk. He opened his eyes wide. The minister froze. That tone. That absurd, overly elegant way of folding hands, which could never belong to a simple servant boy. And, most terrifyingly, the air around the desk suddenly filled with the aroma of wild plum and ginger. The scent of his deceased wife. The scent of his personal, lost paradise. Shen Yi abruptly rose from his desk. He crossed the mats in heavy, rapid strides. He dropped to one knee before Lin and gripped his wrist in a death hold. "Who are you?" Shen Yi's voice broke into a hoarse, frantic whisper, a mix of rage, wild fear, and flaring hope. He jerked Lin towards himself, forcing him to look up. "How does a street urchin know the recipe for the tea my wife used to brew? And why? Why are you looking at me with her eyes? Answer me, who sent you?" Lin found himself face to face with his husband. So close he could feel Shen Yi's breath on his lips. The minister's fingers were squeezing his wrist until it bruised. In Shen Yi's eyes, always so cold, a real fire now raged. Lin panicked. His male body reacted faster than his mind. The instinct of the street brawler, Fei Lin, made him jerk back, and his voice, from fright, cracked into a deep, purely masculine baritone. "Oh, let go, sir. That hurts! What wife? I just found this recipe in my mother's old notebook. She was an herbalist in the provinces too. I'm not a spy, I swear by all the gods and ancestors. Let go." Shen Yi stared at him, breathing heavily and unevenly. His fingers slowly, reluctantly unclenched. Before him, on his knees, was a young, broad-shouldered lad in dirty kitchen clothes, with disheveled hair and calloused hands. This was not his fragile, porcelain Su Lan. Logic and common sense screamed at the minister that this was just an ordinary street charlatan. But deep down, somewhere in the core of his wounded soul, Shen Yi knew for certain, this boy had just lied. The minister slowly rose to his full height, once again transforming into the cold, approachable cliff. He turned his back on Lin, hiding his trembling hands in the wide sleeves of his robe. "Out," Shen Yi said in an icy tone. "But from this day on, you are transferred from the kitchen to the main house. You will be my personal attendant. You will bring me this tea every evening and arrange the scrolls on my desk. If I notice even one suspicious step from you, you will regret ever being born. Fei Lin." The youth hastily rose from his knees, rubbing his reddened wrist, and bowed his head low to hide his happy, relieved smile. "Yes, Your Excellency. I will not let you down." Lin backed towards the exit, carefully closing the sliding door behind him. He stood in the dark corridor, pressing his palm to his wildly beating heart, and whispered silently, "I'm back, Yi. I'm with you again. And this time, I won't let you give up." The morning after the tea incident, Fei Lin was summoned to the main house before the roosters even crowed. He stood in the servants' quarters, staring at the neat pile of dark green robes laid out on his narrow cot. Proper attire for a personal attendant, not the rags of a scullery boy. "This is happening too fast," he whispered to his reflection in a polished bronze mirror. The face that stared back was still unfamiliar. Sharp jaw, thick brows, the insolent slant of dark eyes that belonged to a street brawler, not a refined lady. "I need to remember who I am now. I am Fei Lin. I am a man. I am 20 years old. I am." He paused, lifting his hands to his flat chest and sighing. Completely flat. The new robes were surprisingly comfortable, though Lin kept tripping over the hem. His legs, unnaturally long for what he was used to, seemed determined to tangle themselves in the fabric. He shuffled through the corridors like a newborn fawn, muttering curses under his breath. "Who designed these ridiculous garments? Why must everything for men be so bulky?" Old Jew, the butler, intercepted him halfway to the master's study. The elderly man gave him a long, appraising look. "You walk like a duck that's been kicked in the rear, boy. Straighten up. And for heaven's sake, stop adjusting your collar every 3 steps. You look like a maiden adjusting her hairpin before a suitor." Lin flushed crimson. "I was not adjusting it. There's a wrinkle."
"Wrinkles are the least of your problems," Old Jew grumbled, shoving a heavy tray into Lin's hands. "The master requested his morning tea. To take it to him."
"And try not to drop anything." The last attendant dropped a teacup and was reassigned to the stables, permanently. Lin took a deep breath. squared his shoulders, and marched toward the study with the tray held high. He was determined to be dignified, composed, and professional. He would set the tea down with grace, bow properly, and leave without incident. He pushed open the sliding door and promptly tripped over his own oversized boots. The tray flew from his hands. Hot tea splashed across the floor. The delicate porcelain cup shattered into a dozen pieces. Lin landed hard on his knees, watching in horror as the dark liquid soaked into the expensive bamboo mats. Shen Yi, seated behind his mountain of scrolls, slowly lowered his brush and raised one elegant eyebrow.
I see you've decided to redecorate.
I'm so sorry, Your Excellency. Lin scrambled to gather the broken shards, cutting his finger on a sharp piece. He winced, more from embarrassment than pain. I don't know what happened. The floor was just so. And my feet. I'm not used to. You're not used to walking? I'm not used to anything, Lin muttered miserably. To his surprise, Shen Yi rose from his seat, walked around the desk, and knelt beside him. The minister's long, pale fingers gently took Lin's injured hand and examined the cut. It's shallow, but you should clean it before it becomes infected. Shen Yi paused, his dark eyes searching Lin's face. You're trembling. Your Excellency, I just destroyed your breakfast. I'm naturally a little terrified of being executed. I don't execute servants for clumsy accidents, Shen Yi said dryly. That would be terribly inconvenient. I'd run out of servants within a fortnight.
Lin blinked.
Was that humor from the icy, grieving minister? But the moment passed. Shen Yi released his hand and stood abruptly, retreating behind the safety of his desk. Clean this up.
And bring me another pot of tea.
The same tea as last night. Yes, Your Excellency, Lin said, carefully gathering the shards. He paused at the door. Your Excellency, I noticed you didn't actually eat your dinner last night. Should I ask the kitchen to prepare something light? Perhaps a simple congee with. Why do you care what I eat? The question hung in the air, sharp and cold. Lin's heart clenched. Because I love you, he wanted to scream. Because watching you waste away is like watching my own soul wither. I care because it's my duty, Your Excellency, he said instead, keeping his voice carefully neutral. If you starve yourself, who will I serve? Shen Yi stared at him for a long moment. Then, something flickered in his eyes, something unreadable. Fine. Prepare whatever you wish. But if it tastes like ash, I will have you assigned to the stables as well. Lin bowed and hurried out, a small smile playing on his lips. The next few days were a comedy of errors. Lin had assumed that, having survived 3 weeks as a kitchen assistant, he was finally getting the hang of being a man. He was wrong. The first disaster occurred during his 3rd day as personal attendant. Lin was tasked with retrieving a scroll from the top shelf of the study's massive library. He pushed a wooden stool to the shelf, climbed up, and stretched his arm, only to realize that, despite his new height, the scroll was still just out of reach. Come on, you ridiculous document, he grunted, bouncing on his toes. Just a little closer. He lost his balance. The stool tipped. Lin flailed wildly, grabbed the nearest shelf, and pulled the entire row of scrolls down with him. The crash was monumental. Shen Yi appeared in the doorway, face unreadable. Fei Lin. Yes, Your Excellency, Lin said weakly, buried under a mountain of ancient texts. Are you being attacked by the library?
No, Your Excellency. The library is attacking me.
Shen Yi's lips twitched. He turned quickly, but not before Lin caught the ghost of a smile. I'll send someone to help you. Please do not destroy my entire collection.
Some of these scrolls date back 5 centuries.
Noted, Your Excellency. The second disaster was worse. Lin had never been to a public bathhouse before. In his previous life as Su Lan, he had bathed in private, surrounded by luxurious oils, scented waters, and careful attention from his maids. Men's bathhouses, he discovered, were a completely different experience. You're telling me, Lin whispered to himself, clutching a small wooden bucket, that I have to take my clothes off, in front of everyone. The bathhouse was a vast, steamy cavern filled with naked men of all shapes and sizes. They were lounging in the hot water, scrubbing their backs, laughing loudly, and, worst of all, completely unashamed. Lin stood frozen at the entrance. His new body was a mystery to him. He didn't want to see it. He certainly didn't want anyone else to see it. "Oi, kid! You gonna stand there all day or actually wash?" A large, hairy man called out. I have a skin condition," Lin blurted. "It's contagious. Very, very contagious." The man's eyes widened. He scrambled away, splashing water everywhere. Soon, the area around Lin was completely clear. "Thank heavens for small mercies," Lin muttered, wrapping his towel around his waist like a shield. He shuffled to the bathing area, keeping his head down, and quickly poured water over himself with frantic speed. "That's what you think of me, huh?" He hissed at his own reflection, scrubbing his chest with unnecessary vigor. Flat as a board and twice as useless. A young soldier nearby gave him a strange look. "Were you talking to yourself?" "Only because nobody else will listen to me," Lin snapped. The soldier wisely retreated. The third disaster occurred during a formal dinner. Lin was standing at attention behind Shen Yi's chair, carefully pouring tea and trying not to look at the many nobles seated around the table. They were discussing politics, trade routes, and the impending threat from a neighboring kingdom. All topics that bored Lin to tears. But then one of the nobles, a greasy-faced official named Lord Ma, made a remark that sent ice through Lin's veins. "Minister Shen, you've been rather solitary these past few years. When will you finally take a new wife? The Emperor himself has offered you several excellent candidates." Shen Yi's face remained impassive. "I have no interest in remarrying." "Still pining over that fragile little flower of yours?" Lord Ma laughed. "Su Lan was beautiful, I'll grant you that, but a wife is a wife. There are plenty of others who can warm your bed." The teacup in Lin's hand shattered. The entire table went silent. Every eye turned to the pale, trembling young attendant, who was staring at Lord Ma with murder in his eyes.
Forgive me, Your Excellency," Lin said through gritted teeth. "My hand slipped."
Shen Yi looked at him, really looked at him, and something in his gaze sharpened. "You will leave," Shen Yi said calmly. "Now." Lin bowed stiffly and fled the room. He barely made it to the garden before the tears came. He collapsed onto a stone bench, gasping. "How dare he?" Lin sobbed. "How dare he speak of my Yi like that? That disgusting, foul-mouthed weasel. If I had my old strength, I would have slapped him into the next century." "Fei Lin." Lin jerked upright. Shen Yi was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Your Excellency, I'm so sorry. I ruined your dinner. I'll accept any punishment." Shen Yi walked closer, stopping just in front of him. "Why did you break the cup?" "Because I'm clumsy." "Don't lie to me." Shen Yi's voice was soft but dangerous. "You didn't react when the previous attendant insulted your cooking. You didn't react when the kitchen boy spilled hot oil on your arm. But when Lord Ma mentioned my wife..." He paused. "You looked like you wanted to kill him." Lin's heart stopped. His mind raced, searching for an excuse. "Your wife was clearly beloved, Your Excellency. I heard stories about her."
She sounded like a wonderful woman. Anyone who speaks ill of the dead deserves a broken teacup.
Shen Yi studied him for a long, agonizing moment. Then, to Lin's surprise, the minister knelt down and gently took his injured hand. "You cut yourself again," Shen Yi murmured. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. You're bleeding all over my rose bushes." Lin looked down. Indeed, his palm was covered in small cuts from the shattered porcelain. Shen Yi carefully wrapped his own silk handkerchief around the wound, tying it with unexpected tenderness. "Be more careful," Shen Yi said softly. "I don't want to see you hurt." Lin's breath caught. The way Shen Yi said those words, it was the same tone he used to use with Su Lan. Gentle, concerned, almost fond. "Yes, Your Excellency." Lin managed, his voice barely a whisper. They sat in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant chirping of crickets. For just a second, Lin felt like he was home. Then Shen Yi stood abruptly, his composure restored. "Return to the servants' quarters. You're dismissed for the night." "Yes, Your Excellency." Lin watched him walk away, his heart aching with equal parts love and longing. The weeks passed, and Lin grew more comfortable in his new role. or at least less likely to destroy valuable property. He learned to walk without tripping, to speak without his voice cracking, to navigate the treacherous waters of male anatomy without constant embarrassment. But one thing he could not master: his own heart. Every time Shen Yi smiled, which was rare, but increasingly common, Lin felt like he might burst. Every time Shen Yi praised his tea, his cooking, his careful organization of scrolls, Lin wanted to throw himself into his husband's arms and never let go. The problem was that Shen Yi seemed equally torn. It started small. Shen Yi would reach out to touch Lin's shoulder and then pull back, as if burned. He would stare at Lin across the study, his dark eyes filled with confusion and longing. He would hesitate outside the servants' quarters, clearly wanting to enter but forcing himself to walk away. One night Lin overheard Shen Yi talking to Olju. "I'm losing my mind," Shen Yi admitted, his voice hollow. "I can't stop thinking about him. Every time I see his face, I think of her. Every time he moves, I see her. It's like she's haunting me through him." Olju sighed. "Master, perhaps you just need time. Her grief takes many forms." "Grief? Is that what this is?" Shen Yi laughed bitterly. "I want to hold him. I want to kiss him. I want to. And she's been dead for 3 years. I'm falling in love with a clumsy, awkward street boy, and I can't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling like I've betrayed her." Lin pressed his hand to his mouth, tears streaming down his face. "Oh, Yi," he whispered. "You haven't betrayed anyone. I'm right here." But he couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not like this. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. Lin had always been terrified of loud noises. Su Lan, she would bury herself in Shen Yi's arms during every storm, trembling until his steady heartbeat soothed her fears. It was her secret shame, a noblewoman afraid of thunder, of all things. Now, in Fei Lin's body, the fear was just as strong. The storm hit in the middle of the night. Lin was in the study, organizing the last few scrolls, when a massive crack of thunder split the sky. He screamed. Before he could stop himself, he launched himself across the room, crashing directly into Shen Yi's arms. His legs wrapped around the minister's waist, his face buried itself in the crook of Shen Yi's neck. His whole body shook with uncontrollable terror. "Don't let go!" he sobbed. "Please, Yi, don't let go. Oh, I'm scared. I'm so scared." He froze. Shen Yi froze. The world stood still. Slowly, Lin realized what he had just done, what he had just said. He felt Shen Yi's arms tighten around him, pulling him impossibly closer. He felt the minister's heart pounding against his chest. "Say that again," Shen Yi whispered, his voice trembling. "Say that name again." I didn't." "Lan." Shen Yi pulled back, just enough to look into Lin's eyes. "It was you. All along, it was you. The tea. The way you look at me. The way you fold your hands. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe." His voice broke. "I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was being haunted. But it's really you, isn't it?" Lin couldn't speak. He could only nod, tears streaming down his face. Shen Yi let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pressed his forehead against Lin's, his fingers tangling in Lin's hair. "I love you," Shen Yi breathed. "I thought I was betraying you, falling in love with someone else. But it was you all along. I never stopped loving you. I couldn't. You're my heart, Lan. You've always been my heart." "You're crushing me," Lin managed weakly. "But I don't care. I don't care about anything. I've missed you so much, Yi. I thought I'd never see you again. I thought—" "You came back to me," Shen Yi interrupted. "You fought your way back from death itself. Nothing else matters. Nothing." He pulled Lin closer, burying his face in his hair. "I'm never letting you go again. Never." For a long time, they simply held each other. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but neither of them noticed. The world had narrowed to the warmth of their embrace, the mingling of their breath, the frantic beating of their hearts. "Tell me everything," Shen Yi whispered eventually. "How did this happen? How are you here?" Lin took a shaky breath and began to tell the story. The death, the waking in a stranger's body, the terror, the confusion, the desperate hope that had driven him to this very room. "I wanted to be near you," he admitted. "Even if you never knew who I was. Even if I had to spend the rest of my life as your servant, I just wanted to be close. You foolish, wonderful woman. Shen Yi pressed a kiss to his forehead. Do you know what I would have given for even a glimpse of you? And now you're here in my arms, and I don't know whether to laugh or cry or scream. How about all three? Lin suggested, his voice trembling with emotion. Shen Yi laughed, a real laugh, full of joy and relief. That sounds about right. They sat together on the floor, Lin still perched in Shen Yi's lap, unwilling to move an inch. The storm raged outside, but inside, everything was finally, blessedly calm. What do we do now? Lin asked quietly. We can't exactly tell people. They'll think you've lost your mind. They'll call me a sorcerer. I don't care, Shen Yi interrupted firmly. I don't care what anyone thinks. You're my wife. You've always been my wife. If people want to whisper, let them whisper. I'll face any scandal, any disgrace, any punishment, as long as I have you. Lin buried his face in his husband's chest. You're still the same romantic fool I married. Perhaps. But I'm a romantic fool who's been given a second chance. Shen Yi tilted Lin's chin up, meeting his eyes. I won't waste it. I promise you. A crack of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a deafening roar of thunder. Lin flinched instinctively, but this time, Shen Yi's arms tightened around him, holding him steady. I've got you, Shen Yi murmured. I've always got you. Lin smiled through his tears. I know. The next morning, Lin woke up in Shen Yi's private chambers. It had been an accident, or rather, a series of accidents. They had fallen asleep talking, tangled together on the floor of the study. At some point, Shen Yi had carried him to the bed, too exhausted to care about propriety. Now Lin stared at the silk canopy above him, trying to process the absurdity of it all. I'm in his bed, he whispered. I'm in his bed, in a man's body, with the man I married. How is this my life? Shen Yi stirred beside him, his arm still draped possessively over Lin's waist. He blinked sleepily and a soft smile spread across his face. Good morning, he said. You're still here. Where would I go? I don't know, but I've been terrified you'd disappear every time I closed my eyes. Lin's heart ached. I'm not going anywhere, Yi. I promise. They lay in comfortable silence, soaking in the miracle of being together again. Then Lin's stomach growled loudly, shattering the moment. I suppose you need breakfast, Shen Yi said, amused. I suppose I do, though I doubt the kitchen staff would approve of you cooking it yourself. I'm not the one who manages to burn water, Shen Yi shot back. That was one time, and I was distracted by your handsome face. Shen Yi laughed. An excellent excuse. I'll remember that. They dressed quickly, Lin struggling with his boots as usual, Shen Yi patiently tying his sash, and made their way to the small private kitchen attached to the main chambers. It was rarely used, but it had all the essentials. You're doing it wrong, Lin said, watching Shen Yi fumble with a pot of rice. You're supposed to rinse it first. I'm doing it exactly as the cook showed me. The cook was clearly trying to poison you. Shen Yi raised an eyebrow. You certainly have strong opinions. About rice, always. Lin pushed him aside gently and took over the cooking, moving with practiced ease. They felt like old times, when they would cook together in the smaller kitchen of their private quarters, away from the prying eyes of servants. Shen Yi watched him with a soft smile. I missed this. Missed what? Watching me cook. Missed you. Missed being with you. Missed feeling like I had something to live for. Lin paused, his hands stilling on the pot. You have plenty to live for, he said quietly. Your work, your responsibilities, the kingdom. I know, but none of it felt real without you. Shen Yi stepped closer, wrapping his arms around Lin from behind. You're my anchor, Lan. You always have been. Lin leaned back against him, letting himself relax into the familiar warmth. I love you too, he whispered. Even when you're terrible at making rice. At least I'm consistent. They laughed together, and for the first time in 3 years, the estate of First Minister Shen Yi felt like a home again. But not everything was perfect. Lin soon discovered that while Shen Yi accepted the truth of his identity, everyone else in the estate found his closeness to the minister deeply suspicious. The maids whispered behind his back. The butler gave him pointed, disapproving stares. The kitchen staff, once his allies, now treated him like a threat. Look at him. Lin overheard one maid hissing to another, pretending to be a simple servant, but really he's just a scheming little fox. He's bewitched the master somehow. Frightening, isn't it? They say the master barely ate before this boy arrived. Now he's smiling, laughing. It's unnatural.
Maybe he's a demon in human form, or a sorcerer who's cast a spell on the minister.
Or maybe the master just feels guilty about moving on from Lady Su Lan, the second maid said thoughtfully.
That boy looks nothing like her. It's almost as if the master is trying to forget her.
Lin clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay quiet. He wanted to scream, I am her. I'm right here. She's not dead. But he knew better. Who would believe him? Who could believe such a story? That evening, Shen Yi found him in the garden, staring moodily at the moon. What's wrong? The minister asked, sitting beside him on the stone bench. Everyone thinks you've been bewitched, Lin muttered. They think I'm some kind of demon, or a sorcerer, or a scheming seducer. Let them think whatever they want. It's not that simple, Yi. Your reputation. To hell with my reputation.
Shen Yi took his hand, squeezing it gently.
I've spent 3 years caring about reputation and propriety and what everyone else thinks. And what did it get me? A cold house and a broken heart. But, Lan, Shen Yi's voice was firm but gentle. I don't care if the whole kingdom thinks I've gone mad. I don't care if they call me a fool or a heretic or worse. What I care about is you. Alas, the second chance we've been given. I won't waste it hiding in the shadows. Lin smiled weakly. You're saying you'd risk everything for me? Everything, Shen Yi confirmed, without a moment's hesitation. The Festival of Stars arrived, bringing with it a welcome respite from the tension. Lanterns were strung throughout the estate. The servants were given a rare night off, and Shen Yi, for the first time in years, allowed himself to participate in the festivities. He and Lin slipped away from the main celebrations, walking hand in hand through the moonlit garden. The air was warm, filled with the scent of jasmine and the distant sound of music. I never thought I'd do this again, Lin admitted softly. Walk through this garden with you. Watch the stars. Feel happy.
Neither did I.
Shen Yi stopped, turning to face him. But here we are.
Together again.
He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from Lin's face. The gesture was tender, familiar, full of unspoken love. I have something to confess, Shen Yi said quietly. Oh? Are you secretly terrible at something else besides cooking? Shut up. But Shen Yi was smiling. I spent the first 3 weeks after you woke up in this body convinced I was being haunted. I thought your ghost was possessing this poor boy. I thought I was going mad. I had no idea, Lin admitted. I was too busy trying not to trip over my own feet. Every time you looked at me, I felt like my heart was going to explode. Every time you spoke, I heard your voice. Every time you moved, I saw you. I thought I was losing my mind. Lin squeezed his hand. Why didn't you say anything? How could I? Excuse me, but are you the ghost of my dead wife possessing a street urchin? You would have run screaming. Fair point. Shen Yi pulled him closer, wrapping his arms around his waist. I love you, Lan. I loved you when we were young. I loved you in our marriage. I loved you in death. And I love you now. I will always love you. Even when I'm clumsy and awkward and terrible at being a man? Especially then. Lin laughed, the sound bright and warm against the darkness. I love you too, Yi, more than I ever thought I could. By the end of the night, Lin had made a decision. He couldn't stay as Fei Lin forever. He couldn't pretend to be a servant while his husband loved him as a wife. He needed to be himself, fully, authentically himself. But how? I could just tell everyone, Lin mused aloud as they walked back toward the main house. Stand in the middle of the courtyard and announce, I'm Su Lan, come back from the dead. Shen Yi snorted. That would certainly be dramatic. It would be honest. It would also get you burned at the stake for witchcraft. Oh, right. There is that. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Shen Yi spoke again.
Maybe you don't need to tell everyone. Maybe you just need to be yourself.
With me, in private, where it matters. Lin looked at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, Shen Yi stopped, turning to face him. The servants will gossip. That's inevitable. But they only have to see what we want them to see. A minister and his devoted attendant.
Nothing more.
And in private? In private, Shen Yi's voice dropped to a whisper. You can be my wife again. You can hold me. You can love me. You can be everything you were before. Lin felt tears prick his eyes. And you'd be happy with that? I'd be happy with anything, Shen Yi said. As long as I have you. The night deepened around them, and the stars glittered overhead like scattered diamonds. Lin leaned into his husband's embrace, feeling the familiar beat of his heart. We're going to be all right, he whispered. Aren't we? Of course we are. Shen Yi pressed a kiss to his forehead. We face death and time itself. A little bit of gossip is nothing. Lin laughed softly, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. You're right. We've survived worse. And we'll survive this too. Shen Yi squeezed his hand. Together. Together. It was all Lin had ever wanted. The morning sun streamed through the silk curtains of Shen Yi's private chambers, casting golden patterns across the floor. Lin lay awake, staring at the canopy above him, still unable to believe the events of the past few weeks. He was here, in Yi's bed, in Yi's arms. And Yi knew the truth. You're thinking too loudly, Shen Yi murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. His arm tightened around Lin's waist, pulling him closer. I can hear your thoughts from here. I doubt that, Lin whispered back. I'm thinking about how impossible all of this is. How did we get here? How is any of this real? Shen Yi propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at Lin with soft, loving eyes. Does it matter how? We're together.
That's all that counts.
But. No buts. Shen Yi pressed a gentle kiss to Lin's forehead. I spent 3 years mourning you, Lan.
3 years of waking up in an empty bed, of eating alone, of pretending to be alive when I felt dead inside.
And now you're here. And then whatever form, whatever body, whatever strange twist of fate brought you back to me, I'm not going to question it. I'm going to cherish it. Lin felt tears prick his eyes. You're too good to me. I'm not good enough. I should have protected you. I should have. You did everything you could, Lin interrupted, reaching up to touch Shen Yi's cheek. The doctor said there was no hope. You held my hand until the very end. I remember. I remember everything. Shen Yi's eyes glistened. You remember? I remember the warmth of your hand.
I remember you telling me it was okay to let go.
I remember the tears on your face. Lin's voice broke. I wanted to stay so badly, Yi. I fought so hard to stay with you, but my body was too weak. You're not weak now, Shen Yi said fiercely. You're here. You're alive. You're the strongest person I've ever known. They lay together in silence, letting the weight of their shared grief and joy settle over them. Then Lin laughed softly. What? Shen Yi asked. I just realized I'm still wearing your nightshirt, and it's absolutely enormous on me. I look ridiculous. You look perfect, Shen Yi said, kissing the tip of his nose. But you're right. We should probably get dressed before old Ju comes looking for us. Old Ju has probably already come looking for us and fled in horror.
Then, let's give him something to be horrified about.
Shen Yi pulled Lin into a proper kiss, deep and tender, full of all the longing and love he had held inside for 3 long years. Lin melted into him, his hands tangling in Shen Yi's hair, his heart soaring. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. I love you, Shen Yi whispered. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, Lin replied. Now help me figure out how to get out of this enormous nightshirt without falling on my face. They emerged from the chambers together, Lin still struggling to tie his sash properly, Shen Yi watching him with amused affection. You're doing it wrong, Shen Yi said, gently taking the sash from Lin's hands. Let me. Lin stood still as Shen Yi expertly tied the sash, his long fingers brushing against Lin's waist. It was such a simple, domestic gesture, but it made Lin's heart ache with happiness.
You're blushing, Shen Yi observed.
I am not. It's just warm in here. It's freezing. Then I have a fever. Shen Yi laughed, a genuine laugh that lit up his entire face. I missed this. I missed you. And I missed your terrible jokes.
My jokes are excellent. Thank you very much.
They walked to the private kitchen together, Lin refusing to let Shen Yi do any of the actual cooking. "You're terrible at it," he said. "I'm not going to let you ruin breakfast."
I made a simple congee once.
"You burned it. You burned water, Yi. How do you burn water?" It was a very enthusiastic fire. Lin shook his head, laughing, as he prepared the morning meal. It felt so natural, so right, to be doing this again, to be taking care of his husband, to be making him smile. Shen Yi sat at the small table watching Lin move around the kitchen with practiced ease. "You're the most beautiful woman, person I've ever seen," he said softly. Lin paused, a ladle in his hand, and turned to look at his husband. "You're going to make me cry again." "Then I'll hold you while you cry." "You're ridiculous." "I'm in love. There's a difference." Lin rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. He served the congee, sat down across from Shen Yi, and for the first time in 3 years, they ate breakfast together. A few weeks later, a royal messenger arrived at the estate with an invitation from the emperor himself. Shen Yi was to attend a formal banquet at the palace, and he was expected to bring his new personal attendant. "They want to meet you," Shen Yi explained to Lin, who had turned pale at the news. "The court is curious about my sudden change in demeanor." "They think you've been bewitched," Lin muttered.
Probably.
"But I don't care what they think. You'll come with me, you'll stand behind my chair, and you'll look as fierce as you can manage." "Fierce? Yeah, I can barely walk in these boots. How am I supposed to look fierce?" "Just don't trip. That's all I ask." The banquet was a nightmare. Lin stood behind Shen Yi's chair, trying to look like a proper personal attendant, while dozens of nobles stared at him with barely concealed curiosity. He could hear their whispers, their snide comments, their speculation about that mysterious servant who had stolen the minister's heart. "What do you think he wants from the minister?" one lady whispered to another.
Maybe he's a spy. Or a sorcerer.
"He's certainly handsome enough. Look at those cheekbones." "Don't be ridiculous. A street boy like that? He's clearly after money and power." Lin clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. He didn't care what they thought. He was here for Yi. That was all that mattered. But then Lord Ma approached. The same greasy-faced official who had insulted Su Lan at the last banquet. He smiled at Shen Yi, then turned his eyes to Lin.
"Minister Shen, I hear you found yourself a devoted servant," Lord Ma said, his voice dripping with insincerity.
"Out-touching. Although I must say he doesn't look like much. Skinny, awkward, clearly uneducated. If you ever tire of him, I have several capable young men in my household who would be more than happy to." "Lord Ma," Shen Yi interrupted, his voice cold as ice. "If you value your position, you will not finish that sentence." Lord Ma's smile faltered. "I was merely—" "You are merely being inappropriate. My attendant is not for sale, not for trade, and not subject to your commentary. If you have nothing respectful to say, I suggest you say nothing at all." The table fell silent. Lord Ma's face flushed red, but he retreated without another word. Lin stared at Shen Yi, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, so quietly only Shen Yi could hear. "Always," Shen Yi murmured back. "I will always defend you, Lan." After the banquet, Lin was summoned to the imperial kitchens to retrieve a special gift for the First Minister. The Emperor, impressed by Shen Yi's renewed vitality, had ordered a small vial of the legendary imperial longevity elixir to be delivered to the estate. "It's nothing," the imperial physician said, handing Lin the vial. "Just a ceremonial gesture."
A tonic to promote health and vitality. The Emperor gives it to his most favored ministers.
"It's not meant to be taken immediately. Only during the spring festival as a blessing." Lin nodded, carefully tucking the vial into his robes. He had heard of the elixir before. It was an ancient recipe, passed down through generations of imperial physicians. Some said it could extend life. Others said it was just expensive wine. Either way, it was a great honor, and Lin was determined to present it to his husband with proper ceremony. But that evening, as Lin prepared for bed, his curiosity got the better of him. What could it possibly taste like? He wondered aloud, pulling the vial from his robes. "It smells vaguely of honey and herbs. And something else. Something floral.
He uncorked the vial and sniffed it. The aroma was pleasant, warm, sweet, slightly exotic.
Just a tiny sip, he told himself. Just to see. It's not like a drop will hurt me. I'm in perfect health. He tilted the vial back and took a single, small sip. The liquid was sweet and smooth, with a faint tang of something herbal. It went down easily, warming his throat and spreading warmth through his chest. That's pleasant, Lin murmured. I'll have to tell Yi too. He stopped. A strange sensation was spreading through his body. It started in his stomach. A gentle warmth that slowly intensified until it felt like a small sun burning inside him. Then it spread outward, through his veins, his muscles, his bones. What? What is this? Lin clutched the table, his head swimming. He felt dizzy, disoriented, and suddenly very, very warm. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the sensation faded. Lin blinked.
He felt fine.
Perfectly fine. Maybe a little more energetic than usual, but otherwise completely normal.
Strange, he muttered, setting the vial down.
Perhaps I shouldn't have done that. I'll have to be more careful in the future. He went to bed, thinking nothing more of it.
A month passed.
Lin noticed small changes in his body. His stomach felt odd in the mornings, a strange queasiness that faded after a few hours. He was tired more often, needing to sit down after only a short time on his feet. You look pale, Shen Yi observed one evening. Are you unwell?
I'm fine, Lin insisted. Just a bit tired. Probably working too hard.
You're not working too hard. You barely do anything these days. Fine. I'm not sleeping well. The nightmares about the bathhouse keep coming back. Shen Yi laughed. That was 3 months ago. Trauma doesn't have a timeline, Yi. But Lin was worried. The strange sensations continued. His appetite fluctuated wildly. Some days he was ravenous, other days he couldn't even look at food, and his stomach seemed to be slowly getting rounder. I'm just gaining weight, he told himself, looking at his reflection in the mirror. All the good food in this house, it's bound to catch up with me eventually. He poked his belly. It was definitely rounder, and firmer, and moving. What in the world?
Lin pressed his hand to his stomach. There it was again, a tiny flutter, like a fish swimming in a pond, or like.
No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. But as the days went by, the flutters grew stronger, and Lin could no longer deny the truth. He was pregnant. I'm going mad, Lin whispered, staring at his reflection. That's the only explanation. The shock of everything, the reincarnation, the confusion, the stress. It's made me lose my mind. But his belly was unmistakable, round and firm and undeniably full. He couldn't tell Yi. How could he? It was impossible. Men didn't get pregnant. Even he knew that. And yet, what if it's because of the elixir? He thought, the Imperial Longevity Tonic.
It must have reacted with whatever strange magic brought me back to life.
It must have made my body capable. He pressed his hands to his stomach, feeling another flutter. His eyes filled with tears. I'm going to have a baby, he breathed. Yi's baby. The joy was overwhelming, but so was the terror. How would he explain this? How would anyone accept it? The nobles would call it witchcraft. The emperor would see it as a threat. And Yi's career, his life's work, his dedication to the kingdom, would be destroyed. What do I do? Lin asked his reflection. What do I do? There was no answer, only the distant sound of Shen Yi's footsteps approaching. Lin quickly threw on a loose robe, hiding his belly. He would wait. He would find the right time. He would. Lin, Shen Yi called from the doorway. Are you all right? You've been in here for ages. I'm fine, Lin said too quickly. Just looking at my face. It's still very strange to see it. Shen Yi smiled and crossed the room, pulling Lin into his arms. You're beautiful, inside and out. Lin clung to him, burying his face in his husband's chest. I love you, he whispered. I love you so much, Yi. I love you too, Shen Yi murmured. Now stop hiding in the bathroom.
It's dinner time.
Lin nodded, but his heart was racing. How could he possibly keep this secret? How could he possibly tell the truth? Weeks passed. Lin's belly grew larger, and so did his panic. He started wearing looser clothes, hiding his shape under layers of fabric. He avoided Shen Yi's touch, afraid that his husband would notice the changes. He made excuses. Headaches, stomach pain, exhaustion, anything to avoid scrutiny. But Shen Yi was no fool. "You're hiding something from me," he said one night, sitting Lin down in the study. "I've noticed. You flinch when I touch you. You wear those ridiculous oversized robes. You've stopped letting me hold you at night." "I'm just tired," Lin said weakly. "You're lying." Shen Yi's voice was gentle but firm. "Lin, whatever it is, you can tell me. I love you. I will always love you. Nothing you say could change that." Lin's eyes filled with tears. "You'll think I'm mad." "I already think you're mad. You married me, didn't you?" Despite everything, Lin laughed. It was a weak, watery laugh, but it was real. "I'm pregnant," he whispered. Shen Yi stared at him. "You're what?" "Pregnant. With child. Expecting. Blessed. Whatever you want to call it, I'm carrying a baby." "That's impossible." I know it's impossible, but it's true." Shen Yi's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, shock, confusion, and then joy. "I'm going to be a father?" he breathed. "Aren't you going to ask how? Or why? Or accuse me of witchcraft?" "I don't care about any of that," Shen Yi said fiercely, pulling Lin into his arms. "You're carrying my child. That's all that matters." Lin sobbed into his chest. "You're not afraid? You're not disgusted?" "Afraid? I'm terrified. But not of you. Never of you. I'm terrified of losing you again. I'm terrified of something going wrong. But disgusted?" He pulled back, cupping Lin's face in his hands. "I love you. I love you and our baby more than anything in the world." Lin kissed him, tears streaming down his face. The next morning, Shen Yi summoned the most trusted physician in the empire, an old woman named Healer Wu who had served the imperial family for decades. "She won't reveal our secret," Shen Yi assured Lin. "She's been with my family since I was a child. She's discreet." Healer Wu examined Lin thoroughly, her wrinkled face unreadable.
"This is remarkable," she finally said. "Truly remarkable."
"The boy is pregnant. With twins, I might add." "Twins?" Lin gasped.
"Twins," Healer Wu confirmed. "Two healthy babies. They're growing well.
Strong heartbeats. Everything appears to be in order." "How is this possible?" Shen Yi asked. He's a man." Healer Wu shook her head. "I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect it has something to do with the transformation. The boy's soul is female. I can sense it. The body is male, but the soul has altered the body, made it capable of things it shouldn't be capable of." "You can sense souls?" Lin asked, amazed. "I'm a healer, child. I've been practicing for 60 years. I've seen things that would make your hair stand on end. This is unusual, yes, but not the strangest thing I've encountered." Shen Yi took Lin's hand. "What do we do now?"
"We prepare," Healer Wu said. "The birth will be difficult, more difficult than a normal birth.
The body wasn't designed for this, but with proper care and rest, it's possible. I'll need to visit regularly, and you'll need to tell no one, not a single soul." "Are there risks?" Lin asked quietly. Healer Wu met his eyes. "There are always risks."
"But I've delivered hundreds of babies. I won't let anything happen to you or your children."
After she left, Lin collapsed into Shen Yi's arms.
"I'm scared," he admitted. "I'm so scared."
"I know. So am I." Shen Yi held him tightly. "But we'll face it together. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The birth came earlier than expected. Lin woke in the middle of the night, clutching his stomach as a wave of pain washed over him. He screamed for Shen Yi, who was at his side in an instant. "It's happening," Lin gasped. "The babies, they're coming." Shen Yi's face went white, but he didn't panic. He called for Healer Wu, boiled water, gathered blankets, everything she had told him to do. "This is going to hurt," Healer Wu warned Lin, her hands steady as she prepared for the birth. "More than anything you've ever felt." But you're strong. You can do this. Lin nodded, gritting his teeth. He had survived death. He had survived waking up in a stranger's body. He had survived the fear and confusion of a new identity. He could survive this. The labor lasted through the night and into the morning. Lin screamed, cried, and begged for it to end, but he never gave up. Shen Yi held his hand through every contraction, whispering words of encouragement and love. "Don't leave me," Lin sobbed. "Please don't leave me." "I'm right here," Shen Yi promised. "I'll never leave you. Never again." And finally, as the sun rose over the estate, Healer Wu held up two tiny, crying bundles.
"2 boys," she announced, tears in her eyes. "Healthy.
Beautiful. Perfect." Lin collapsed against the pillows, exhausted and trembling. But when Shen Yi placed the babies in his arms, he felt a surge of joy so powerful that it chased away the pain.
"Look at them," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "They're so tiny.
So perfect." Shen Yi sat beside him, wrapping his arms around both Lin and the babies. "I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "I love all 3 of you, more than anything in the world." But Lin's joy was clouded by fear. He looked at his husband, at their beautiful children, and he knew this idyllic life couldn't last. The secret would come out eventually, and when it did, everything would be destroyed. He spent the next few weeks in a haze of sleepless nights and constant worry. He loved his children with all his heart, but he couldn't shake the dread that clung to him like a shadow. "What's wrong?" Shen Yi asked one night, finding Lin staring at the baby's crib. "You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." "I am," Lin whispered. "Our world.
Our secret.
If anyone finds out." "They won't. You can't promise that, Yi. You can't promise that the Emperor won't hear rumors, that the nobles won't send spies."
"That."
"I can promise that I will protect you," Shen Yi interrupted firmly. "I will protect our family, whatever it takes." But Lin knew the truth. No matter how powerful Shen Yi was, he couldn't protect them from everything. The Emperor's favor was fickle. The nobles were ruthless. And the secret of a man giving birth. It was the kind of scandal that destroyed careers, families, entire dynasties. "I need to think," Lin said, pulling away from his husband's embrace. "I need time to think." A few nights later, Lin made his decision. He couldn't stay, not because he didn't love Shen Yi. He loved him more than anything in the world, but because he loved him too much to let his husband destroy himself. "Your career," Lin whispered to the sleeping babies. "Your reputation. Your life's work. I can't let you lose everything because of me." He began packing. Clothes for the babies. Money he had saved. Food for the journey. He wrote a letter for Shen Yi, his tears smudging the ink. "My dearest Yi, I love you. I have loved you since the moment I first saw you, and I will love you until the day I die. But I can't let you sacrifice everything for me. Your work means so much to the kingdom. Your reputation is everything. If the truth comes out, you'll lose it all. Your position, your honor, your place in the world. I can't do that to you. So I'm leaving. I'm taking the baby somewhere safe. Somewhere no one will find us. Please don't try to search for me. Please don't throw away your life for a love that was never meant to be. I'll always love you. Your Lan." He folded the letter, placed it on Shen Yi's desk, and slipped out into the night. The journey was brutal. Lin traveled for weeks, moving slowly with the 2 infants. He slept in abandoned huts, under bridges in the hollows of trees. He foraged for food and water, relying on the survival instincts he had developed as Fei Lin. The babies were his only comfort. Their tiny faces, their soft cries, their warm bodies curled against his chest. They were Yi's children. They were his. And they were all he had left. "Your father is a good man," Lin whispered to them one night as they slept in a cave. "The best man I've ever known. He loved me so much. He would have given up everything for us. That's why I had to leave, because I love him too much to let him give up everything." He cried silently, his tears falling into the baby's hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. But it's the only way. It's the only way to protect him." When Shen Yi found the letter, he broke. He screamed. He sobbed. He threw furniture across the room. Old Ju had to physically restrain him from running out into the night. I have to find them, Shen Yi shouted. I have to bring them back. You don't even know where they went, Old Ju yelled back. Calm down. Think. I can't think. My wife took my children and disappeared. How am I supposed to think? But eventually Shen Yi regained his composure. He began his search. He questioned every traveler, every merchant, every villager he encountered. He rode from one end of the kingdom to the other, his eyes wild with desperation. I'm looking for a young man with 2 infants, he said to anyone who would listen. He's thin, with dark hair and dark eyes. He's traveling alone. Have you seen him? Most people shook their heads. Some gave him pitying looks, but a few remembered. A young man with 2 babies? A farmer said. Yes, I saw him, heading toward the mountains.
The mountain villages.
He looked exhausted. Poor thing. Thank you, Shen Yi breathed. Thank you. He rode faster. A month after Lin's escape, Shen Yi found him. Lin was living in a tiny, isolated mountain village. He had been taken in by an elderly couple who had lost their own children to bandits. They gave him a small cottage, food, and the safety of anonymity. When Shen Yi appeared in the village square, gaunt and desperate, Lin felt his heart shatter. Yi, he whispered. Shen Yi saw him. He rode straight toward him, sliding off his horse and pulling Lin into his arms. Don't you ever leave me again, Shen Yi sobbed. Don't you ever do that again. I had to, Lin cried. I had to protect you. I don't want to be protected. I want to be with you. I chose you, Lan. I choose you. I choose our children. I choose our family. Nothing else matters. Nothing. You'll lose everything, Lin said. Your career. Your reputation. Everything you've worked for. Then I'll lose it, Shen Yi said fiercely. I don't care. I don't need a title. I don't need the emperor's favor. I need you. I need our children. I need our family.
Lin clung to him.
I was so scared, he sobbed. I was so scared of ruining your life. Don't you understand? Shen Yi pulled back, cupping Lin's face in his hands. You are my life. You and the children. Without you, there's no point to anything. I don't want to be a minister. I don't want to be the emperor's servant. I want to be your husband. I want to be a father. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I can't ask you to give up everything. You didn't ask. I chose. And I'll keep choosing you every single day for the rest of my life. They returned to the estate together. Shen Yi resigned from his position as First Minister, citing exhaustion and a desire for a simpler life. The emperor was surprised but gracious, granting Shen Yi a generous pension and a formal title of retired Grand Scholar. The whispers followed them, of course. The gossips and scandals never fully stopped. But Shen Yi and Lin didn't care. They built a new life, a quiet, domestic, beautiful life. They moved to a small estate in the countryside, far from the intrigues of the capital. They raised their twin boys, teaching them to read, to ride horses, to be kind and honorable. And they loved each other. Every day, Lin woke up in Shen Yi's arms. Every night, they went to sleep together, their children sleeping peacefully in the next room. And every meal, every laugh, every conversation was a gift. You know, Lin said one evening as they sat on the veranda watching the sunset, I never thought I'd have this. Have what? This. Peace.
Happiness. Family.
Lin leaned against his husband. I was so scared for so long. So scared of losing you. So scared of losing everything we'd built. Me too, Shen Yi admitted. But we made it.
We're here.
Together. Lin smiled. You still can't cook, though. Shen Yi laughed. And you still can't walk in boots without tripping.
True. But I've learned to live with my imperfections.
As have I. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the hills. Their children's laughter echoed from inside the house. The air smelled of jasmine and wild plum. I love you, Lin said softly. I love you too, Shen Yi replied. And I'll love you for the rest of our lives.